screen. Haribol. Okay. Jai, excuse me. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhari. Jana Balava Giribaradhari. Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhari. Jana Balava Giribaradhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachare. Yamunatira Vanachare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhari. Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhari. Jana Balava Giribaradhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Nandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachare. Yamunatira Vanachare. Vanachare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Dava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Stadasasismad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Shri Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Sankirtan Yagya Ki Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 7, the sacrifice performed by Daksa, Text 10. Correct? Tada Vrishadwaja Dvesha Kalilatma Prajapati Shivavalokad Abhavach Charad Drada Ivamala Tadavrisha Dwaja Dvesha Kalilatma Prajapati Shivavalokad Abhavach Charadrada Ivamala Tadavrishadwaja Dvesha Kalilatma Prajapati Shivavalokad Abhavach Charadrada Ivamala Tadavrishadwaja Dvesha Kalilatma Prajapati Shivavalokad Abhavach Charadrada Ivamala. Dvesha Kalilatma Prajapati Shivavalokad Abhavach Charadrada Ivamala. Mataji's. Kalilatma Prajapati Shivavalokad Abhavach Charadrada Ivamala. Tadavrisha Dvaja Dvesha Kalilatma Prajapati Shivavalokad Abhavach Charadrada Ivamala. Tada, at that time, Vrishadwaja, Lord Shiva, who rides on a bull, Dvesha, envy, Kalila Atma, polluted heart, Prajapati, King Daksha, Shiva, Lord Shiva, Avalokat, by seeing him, Abhavat, became, Sharat, in the autumn, Hrada, lake, Eva, like, Amala, cleansed. Translation. At that time, when Daksha saw Lord Shiva, who rides upon a bull, his heart, which was polluted by envy of Lord Shiva, was immediately cleansed, just as the water in a lake is cleansed by autumn rains. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Here is an example of why Lord Shiva is called auspicious. If anyone sees Lord Shiva with devotion and reverence, his heart is immediately cleansed. King Daksha was polluted by envy of Lord Shiva, and yet by seeing him with a little love and devotion, his heart immediately became cleansed. In the rainy season, the reservoirs of water become dirty and muddy. But as soon as the autumn rain comes, all the water immediately becomes clear and transparent. Similarly, although Daksha's heart was impure because of his having slandered Lord Shiva for which he was severely punished, Daksha now came to consciousness. And just by seeing Lord Shiva with veneration and respect, he became immediately purified. Tadavrashadvajadvesha Kalilatma Prajapati Shivavalokad Abhavach Charadradha Ivamala. At that time, when Daksha saw Lord Shiva, who rides upon a bull, his heart, which was polluted by envy of Lord Shiva, was immediately cleansed, just as the water in a lake is cleansed by autumn rains. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapatarubhyas cha kripa sindubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Yes, so this is very surprising development in this story. I think we all know, or most of us know at least in great detail, in really just great detail, what the story is. It is really a story. Daksha's offenses against Lord Shiva, and he implicated others who, to our knowledge, we're not really feeling like that otherwise, but somehow he influenced them to also become offensive. And the one, Pusha, he showed his teeth, sort of grinning, when Daksha was insulting, just in really not nice ways at all. Daksha was insulting Lord Shiva, and there was one other whose name I forget offhand, but he also participated in the offenses. So otherwise they normally would not really have done that, like Bhrigu Muni. Lord Shiva is his younger brother, anyway, one of his brothers, and he wouldn't offend him like that. Bhrigu Muni, he is a famous sage, actually, who appears elsewhere in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam doing very good things. So, but association is like that actually Hiranyakashipu, of all people, he gives a nice, a clear explanation, type of explanation about association when he's trying to instruct Prahlad to not associate with devotees. It's really quite an extraordinary situation, but he tells him that you beware of bad association because, he says, the soul is like crystal. The soul is like crystal. You know, you get these chandeliers particularly. You get different things made of crystal, but you see chandeliers around sometimes, and there's a whole lot of different crystal pieces hanging from them. And the light bulbs inside are turned on, and it all illuminates, it all lights up in a quite, very kind of interesting way, and it looks really very brilliant and sort of high class, you could say. Yes, because the crystal is not just your ordinary glass. Crystal has been compressed far more strongly than regular glass, among other things. So the silver, crystal refracts light. The light passes through, but the light picks up from the crystal different hues and colors and things like this, and therefore crystal is something special. At least that's a quite common use of crystal. So anyway, Hiranyakashipu says that beware of association, be careful who you associate with, because the soul is like crystal. And whatever light or whatever it is held up against, that light passes through and is refracted in different ways. So, but the basic point is that whatever you hold crystal up against, the light just passes through on the other side, out on the other side. So in other words, whoever we associate with, their influence, you can say their influence, but it's actually just them, their nature. Their nature will just pass through us and appear, via us. And people will think, oh, this is us, but actually we're reflecting or refracting someone else. But we have become like that by being exposed. So this is what happened with some of those personalities. Even particularly Bhrigu Muni comes to mind, because towards the end of the 10th canto, second to last chapter, he figures very prominently he performs an exercise to establish who is superior. Is it Lord Brahma? Is it Lord Shiva? Or is it Lord Vishnu? And he goes to great lengths to establish. Eventually he establishes very, very clearly that actually Lord Vishnu is superior to the others. The others, of course, they're very great. But just because someone is very great doesn't mean there can't be someone else who's greater. So it's like that. So Bhrigu Muni features like that very prominently in a very auspicious and important way, establishing an extremely important and essential point in Vedic philosophy and Vedic culture, the position of Lord Vishnu. But even Bhrigu Muni got caught up in all these offenses, and as we read a couple of days ago, as a reaction to his offenses, he was given the beard of a goat. Goats, male goats, have sort of beard type things. And Daksa got the head of the goat, but he didn't get to keep the beard. The beard was somehow removed and placed on Bhrigu, and not just sort of placed there so it sort of hung there, but it actually became fixed there. It actually became fixed as a permanent reminder that you committed very serious offense, and you must not ever, just never, can you do something even slightly like that again. If some similar situation occurs, just get out, get away, because you never know. You might become influenced. So, of course, we mentioned that what Hiranyakashipu says is actually, Srila Prabhupada quotes it in Nectar of Devotion. That's where you can find it. That the soul is like crystal, so whatever you hold it up against, it just, that light just passes through. And in other words, the crystal just adopts that. So therefore we have to be very careful about association. We really do. And the way we do that is that, of course, in the process of associating with someone, there is the giving and there is the receiving of the association. Giving means that you, one person, takes the sort of predominant position in the interaction, and the other person receives, the other person listens. So, we noticed it, I noticed it at least personally, during the time that I was distributing Srila Prabhupada's books on the streets every day in England. Every day you meet so many people. Every day you meet, I don't know if anyone ever counted, but must be more than 100 people, because sometimes we distribute 100 books in a day, but just one to each person who took one. So it might be 150, it might be 200 people. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. So some of those people, not so many, but some, they want to tell you their story. They want to say something about themselves, and you can't just sort of cut them off totally and just, dominate them completely. Sometimes you've got to just have a bit of a back and forth. But you got to be careful, because some of them have their own philosophies of life, which pretty much inevitably are just, mistaken philosophies, you could say. And yeah. So if you hear enough of that from enough people, then even though you're a devotee and you're chanting every day, etc., and it's not that you actually want to become like that, but you become influenced. Yeah. Association is extremely powerful if you become the receiver. Then it's sort of like, you could say, you become something like a sponge, if you know what I mean. You put a sponge on a surface which has water, and it just draws the water in. You don't have to, you don't even have to move it around to get the water. You just place it there, and it starts drawing the water in oftentimes. So it works like that. Association works like that. So anyway, in that, the event which led to all of what we're reading about today a number of people who otherwise would not have taken positions, antagonistic positions against Lord Shiva. They did. And they got punished, like Brigu got the beard of a goat. So, but here of course we have Daksa, who was the culprit, the main offender, really the main terrible offender. But he has been punished. As Prabhupada says here, he was severely punished. He slandered Lord Shiva, for which he was severely punished. And then, so now he's come to consciousness that, what did I do? Why did I do that? How could I have done that? So Daksa is about to offer prayers to Lord Shiva. And earlier, I don't know if you remember, but we read Srila Prabhupada made the point. It was in one of the verses right at the stage where Daksa got the head of the goat permanently also for the rest of his life, that Prabhupada makes the point that Daksa in due course, which means just coming up now, Daksa is going to offer very nice prayers to Lord Shiva. Very nice prayers. Having become reformed doesn't mean he's not going to have to keep the head of a goat. But he's going to offer very nice prayers, which over the next so many days we'll be reading. So he's become transformed through a very severe experience. How severe could it be? He was beheaded. But then, due to the mystical powers of different of those personalities, he didn't just die and just that was it, that was the end of his body. When they put the head on his shoulders, the goat's head, he came back to life. Yeah. So he's become reformed. And as we're going to see, he becomes extremely emotional and extremely repentant and regretful that how did I do those things? And that's nice. That's very nice. Punishment is ultimately meant to reform. Punishment is ultimately meant to reform and not just simply inflict pain, although it may inflict pain. In so many cases, punishment will, of course, inflict pain, but it's not simply a matter of inflicting pain. It's really, the goal is to correct. So Daksa's become corrected. And we read in different of our literatures, there are different incidents, different pastimes, different happenings in which people, it works in different ways, but different people become corrected. For example, even actually in regards to Lord Shiva, not exactly him becoming corrected, but one of the things that Daksa criticized him just really harshly for was that Lord Shiva sometimes he goes and associates with extremely degraded people. Yeah, even some of them, they're barely within the human species, if they are, like ghosts, goblins, hobgoblins, and pishachas, jeshtas. These are different forms of witches and, shocking, ghastly people from different cultures. And maybe he also associates with Tikalosh too, if you're familiar with that. If you've heard of, hope you haven't met one, but if you've heard about them. So he associates with them. He goes to the places where they stay, like the crematoriums, the graveyards, and he even does things a little bit like what they do, really degraded things, which are just have no place in a decent person's life, like taking intoxicants. Sometimes he smokes ganja, marijuana, Daksa. Sometimes he smokes it, not because he wants to enjoy the experience, of course, which is the normal thing, but because, and he covers his body in the ashes of cremated bodies and sometimes wears garlands of skulls, things which by normal standards are really extreme. So he does that, not because he thinks this is just great, this is something really good to do, and he gets some fun out of it or something like that, but because he knows that those very low sort of creatures, you could say, or whatever you'd call them, that they're attracted to such things. So if he displays himself in some of these ways, they're going to think, oh, look at him, he's good. They'll become attracted to him. And in that way, he may be able to impart some Krishna consciousness to them. And actually, you could say, convert them from being just hellish beings to actually being proper human beings, being devotees of the Lord. So it's actually a manifestation of his mercy that he presents himself in ways which, well, as we saw with Daksa, by normal human standards are just not acceptable at all. They're really just for the demented and totally degraded. So in this way, he reforms them. Dakshas become reformed directly or indirectly by the actions of Lord Shiva and his followers. So Dakshas become reformed. Lord Shiva reforms those people. Those people, of course, they're not easy to reform, but as we understand, sometimes they become devotees. And, of course, Jagai and Madai became reformed by Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda perhaps particularly. And Madai, after being reformed and also going through, a drastic experience, particularly with Lord Chaitanya, who almost killed them on the spot, then they became corrected, and particularly Madai, who was the worst of the two and was the one who actually attacked Lord Nityananda physically, Madhai became corrected, very corrected, and he became a saintly person. He became a great saintly person. And, there used to be, it's become lost now due to the shifting course of the Ganges in Bengal, West Bengal, but just in the Mayapur area, just within a kilometer or so or couple of kilometers of Mayapur itself, there used to be Madhai Ghat. Madhai Ghat. Ghat meaning a bathing place, like a constructed bathing place, not just like a beach or something, but a set of steps going down from the ground level down to usually a water, or not necessarily a river, but oftentimes a river, in that case the Ganges. So he built it himself by hand. He asked Lord Nityananda, he offered prayers to Lord Nityananda, and those prayers, Vrindavan Das Thakur, the author of Chaitanya Bhagavat, who presents all the prayers, they're quite extensive. Vrindavan Das Thakur says, anyone who hears these prayers of Madhai will develop love for Lord Chaitanya, will develop Krishna Prema. In other words, they're just amazingly influential in very wonderful ways. So Madhai built the Ghat by hand. Well, he asked Lord Nityananda what to do. How can I make up for my offenses to you? And I've offended so many other people. I've forgotten who they are. I don't know who they are. If I knew, I'd apologize to them and somehow make up for it. So what can I do? And Lord Nityananda told him, build a Ghat on the bank of the Ganges and live there. And all day, just sit there and keep the place clean and chant and just be there. And whenever some person comes to bathe, and there would be so many people who'd come to bathe, then you apologize to them and say, if previously I offended you in any way, please forgive me, and offer your dandavats on the ground, bow down on the ground in front of them. So he did that for the rest of his life. He didn't just apologize to someone, sorry. He was there for the rest of his life. We don't know really how many years, but he was sort of 30-ish or something like that probably. So could easily have been 40 years or even more. And that's all he did for the rest of his life. Yeah. So he's another example, or him and his brother Jagai, they're both examples of people becoming corrected by some dramatic experience. In the Bhagavatam, in the 6th canto, Ajamil, he had his encounter with the Yamadutas, and that also that corrected him. Correction through shock treatment, correction through devastation, personal devastation. He also became corrected because he didn't actually die. He was in the process of dying. The Yamadutas came to take him away to Yamaraj for punishment because he was just too sinful. So they came, and they're shocking-looking people. And he saw them, and he was shocked. But then the Vishnu Dutas came and sent the Yamadutas away. And he didn't die. He actually became revived, and he lived on for some time. And he went to Haridwar, and he lived at Haridwar with devotees. And he became a pure devotee. And not long after, he passed away, and he went back to Godhead. So these are examples of personalities, and there are more. Of course, there's more. Personalities who were just terrible. They were really very, very bad. So bad, it's hard to be that bad. But they became corrected by some special intervention, ultimately intervention of the Lord's devotees like that. So this happens. There's also the Decoyed Brahman, if you remember that story. That's quite a story. He was another killer, rapist, and just totally impossible person. But he was corrected by Lord Nityananda, and he became a saintly person. He became a kirtan man. That was his service. Every day he'd go out with his dacoit, means criminal, previously criminal. He changed his ways, and he got them to change their ways. And every day they'd go out all around chanting the holy names. But they had their special style of kirtan, very heavy style of kirtan. There are people like that. There used to be more, I remember, back in the old days of ISKCON. Sure. Heavy, like aggressive kirtan. So, but they did kirtan like that, and they were known as the Dacoit Vaishnavas. Although they were no longer dacoits, they were, sort of recovered, reformed dacoits. But people would hear this boom, 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 kirtan coming, and they know, it's the Dacoit Vaishnavas. Just step aside, give them some space. But they got corrected. And Srila Prabhupada gives, or actually the verse itself gives, and Prabhupada gives a very nice example of how this happens, or the principle involved. In the rainy season, the reservoirs of water become dirty and muddy. But as soon as the autumn rain comes, all the water immediately becomes clear and transparent. Yeah, because, the rainy season, at least how it used to be before, and it depends. Some years it's like that now too, not every year. But there's so much rain. There's just so much rain that the bodies of water, the ponds and kunds and etc., there's just so much rain that all the earth in them, at the bottom of them and around them and so on, it all just gets stirred up. Just too much rain. And so they become muddy and dirty. But then the rain stops. The rainy season stops. And actually then there's normally what they call the Indian summer. means there's summer, then the rainy season, then there's the Indian summer, then there's autumn. Indian summer means it becomes hot again. It becomes hot. Not like summer, but it becomes hot, 35 to 40 degrees every day, or even a little more than 40. So everything stabilizes. But then autumn comes, and occasionally you get some rain in autumn, but you don't get heavy rain. You just get some light rain. And the ponds and other bodies, little bodies of water and so on, they become very nice, fresh water. Some new water is coming and filling them again, but it's gentle, and so it doesn't stir up the dirt. So the little bodies of water, they become very clear, transparent, peaceful, and very nice. So this is what happened with Daksa. His heart became stirred up and dirty and muddy and just horrible. But then there was the period of correction and stabilization. And then his heart became very nice. And this is what happens with these people who get corrected effectively. Not everybody does. I mean, at least in material life. In the pastimes of the Lord, it's one thing, but just in everyday life, then, you get some terrible people. They go through a process which is meant to be a process of correction, but it doesn't correct them. They may come out worse. They go to jail and associate with the other criminals, and they become bigger criminals. But amongst the devotees, these things generally, those experiences of being corrected, even severely corrected, the person benefits and becomes a better person and a better devotee. The Kaliya serpent we mentioned last week is another example. Yes. So now Daksa has come to his senses, and we'll read how now he's seeing Lord Shiva with veneration and respect, and what a purified person he becomes. And it's interesting, Prabhupada notes it right at the beginning of the purport. Here's an example of why Lord Shiva is called auspicious, because as Krishna means all attractive, Shiva means auspicious. That's what the word means. And therefore, Shiva is also a name of Krishna. Sometimes Jiva Goswami makes the point in Tattva Sandarbha. Sometimes in some Vedic literatures you read something about Shiva doing something, but it's actually Krishna. As it turns out, you find out that, it's not Lord Shiva, it's Krishna, because Shiva is a name of Krishna. Because who is more auspicious than Krishna? No one. Even Lord Shiva's not as auspicious, even though generally he is very auspicious. So yes, this contact with Krishna, contact with the devotees, it makes inauspiciousness auspicious. Inauspiciousness becomes transformed into auspiciousness. And this is just a very wonderful example of that. Hare Krishna. Any comment or question? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev. Thank you for the class. How do we mitigate the influence of, karmis or, these people who we are preaching to if we do somehow get that association?
Yeah, what do you do about it if people, they've got to try and present whatever to you? Well, this may sound a little sort of antisocial or something, but when I was distributing books on the streets of England every day for some years, every day and sometimes a few times a day, you had to meet. And, you could use the word fanatical, but let's just say enthusiastic, born-again Christian who just had to tell you the good news and so on. Anyway, what to do? So, we didn't want to get into an argument and, no, it's not like that, it's like this. No, it's like something else. Oh, all this. Having done that a few times, I think I learned the lesson myself, and pointless arguments, which just end up creating disturbance for you and for them. So, and what to speak of wasting time that you could be using for doing something useful. So, what we would do, we would tell the person that, look at our watch. Important appointment, I forgot. I've just got to go right now, and excuse ourselves like that, which, is not really dishonest, because, we have appointments. We have to meet the people. So it's true, actually. It's not a lie or something. But it worked every time. Every time it worked. That's, a process for escaping in like, a particularly heavy type of situation. But otherwise, like if you meet someone and you're trying to present Krishna consciousness, but they feel they must present whatever from their side. So if you just shut them up, it's not really, that's antisocial. It's not very nice. And it may offend them too, and they may just, go away. Whereas if you dealt with them nicely, they might take you seriously and take what you say seriously. So it's sort of like you have to learn, one part of it, learn how to take certain things they say, and then you may have to interrupt a little or sort of somehow insert yourself into the discussion, but then take that and turn it to a point in Krishna consciousness, which can often, usually be done. Sometimes the people, they just have to tell you how they're having a hard time in life. This happens. It's not unusual. These people who want to talk, quite a few of them want to talk about their problems. So if you can insert yourself without actually, really cutting them off, you can make some important point and help them to understand the value of Krishna consciousness in regards to dealing with personal problems and situations. That's the best thing. There's this one devotee, he may still be distributing books, although by now he's at least 70. he may be slightly older than 70. He's been distributing books for 50 years on the streets. And he would ask people, what do you do? Kind of normal type of thing. And the person would say, I'm a ... And he had worked out all the responses in the world for any type of occupation a person might possibly have, but how to switch it around and sort of take charge of the conversation. Yeah. I remember he came to London and he was telling us, in the 70s. And he told us, one of my favorites, he said, is when I meet a plumber. When I meet a plumber, and he says, I'm a plumber, I say, oh, that's great. If it wasn't for people like you, there'd be water everywhere. And the person would laugh. And, he's kind of established himself in the exchange. Hare Krishna. Oh, Srip Damodar Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Yeah, when I first read this pastime of Lord Shiva punishing Daksha, giving him the head of the goat, it seemed really extreme to me in some ways. And especially it seemed extreme that as Daksha is offering his prayers, and it seems like he's really corrected. It was like going in my mind that, is Lord Shiva going to commute the punishment, reduce it? I was sort of hopeful that that would happen. But that doesn't happen. And yet,
doesn't seem to,
Daksha and all others that get some punishment from the Lord, they readily accept it. And I was thinking this is quite a wonderful quality of a genuine person, of a genuine devotee. They're not apologizing with the hope that it will be commuted. Even like Kaliya, he goes through this whole purification and he gets banished.
Right.
I'm sure he's expectant that I can get the association with the Lord, but he doesn't demand it, he doesn't feel resentful.
Right.
In some cases you find some devotees, they even celebrate it, like Lord Chaitanya banishing Mukunda.
Right,
he celebrates it.
Right.
Whereas I think that if I get punished by my spiritual master, the devotees, I'm thinking, why? I've corrected myself. But these demigods, they have that quality, especially I guess of that level, they have that quality of accepting and not being resentful so much. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's good. Thank you. That's a very good point. It's a very good point. Prabhupada told the story, I think it's in Leelamrita, if I remember correctly, but anyway, it's somewhere. He was at a program of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's and his spiritual master, and he was right at the back, like back row, and there was an elderly, he was sort of, 20s or 30s, maybe 20s or 30s or something, Prabhupada. But there was an elderly man sitting next to him who was hard of hearing. And he would regularly turn to Prabhupada and ask him, what did he say? And Prabhupada would then explain, he said this and this. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did not appreciate it. So he stopped the class and pointed to Prabhupada and said, you, Babu, would you like to speak? Would you like to come and sit here and speak in front of plenty of devotees? And surely we can imagine everyone just looking at Prabhupada. But Prabhupada, not only was he not resentful, but later, in our time, he told his disciples about that, how he got chastised. And Prabhupada said that he treasured the remembrance of it. He used that term. He treasured his remembrance of his being chastised and even publicly corrected. And I tell you what, Prabhupada, when he gave class, he didn't like it when devotees made noise. He had a particular thing about children, little children, the mothers keeping their children quiet. I mean, he really had a thing that the mother, of course, must take the child out of the temple room, but while taking the child, must put her hand over the child's mouth. And you can imagine, here's this child who's a bit agitated, making a noise, and suddenly bang, over the mouth. Wow. Further agitation. But Prabhupada did that. He did it every time. I saw him do it a few times in the manner. Yeah. So, but there's what you've said is very